the
Chris
Rooster,
Russell.
Chris Russell.
Yeah.
That guy loves him some Dan Quinn. He was victory lapping it all over the place
Dan Quinn
yesterday
too.
when he was hired.
But I got to tell you, I was getting texts from buddies that hated the decision. One guy said it's an embarrassing hire. Another guy said wrong move. I mean, I told him, I said, look,
Nobody knows.
Nobody knows. And I said, we're about to play the 58th Super Bowl.
Right.
So 58 years of Super Bowls. How many coaches in the history of the NFL have taken their teams to Super Bowls? And I'll tell you exactly how many. In 58, 65. All right, 65 coaches have taken their teams to Super Bowls. Ron Rivera is one of them. So is Dan Quinn.
Right.
All right. So you can kill him for having a 500 record, and he was 0-5 in year 6. They let him go. There's probably a lot of different reasons, but he took his team to a Super Bowl. I think he probably learned a lot in those 6 years. His defenses have always been good. I mean, Drabby would know this. When he was in Seattle as a defensive coordinator, they finished number 1 in points and yards allowed in the league back-to-back years.
2 years.
What's weird
That's
is in
pretty
Atlanta,
impressive.
And in Dallas this year, even though they looked like crap against Green Bay,
It fell apart.
And maybe you could put some of that on Dan Quinn. They didn't make the adjustments. We were talking to the guy yesterday about that. But they finished 5th in points allowed and in yards allowed. So he's historically had really good defenses. Now he's got to put a staff together.
outside of Atlanta. What's weird is in Atlanta, I think the offenses were better than the defenses.
Yeah, but Drabby, you were pointing out something the other day that they didn't spend a lot of money on their defense.
Yeah, I'd have to find it, but like 5 years in a row, they were below 25th in the NFL in money spent on defense.
Yeah, so maybe they just went all in on offense.
Well, I know that another anecdote that I learned, as we're all kind of just like getting our files filled here on Dan Quinn, is I think it was on one of Connor's podcasts because I was listening to a bunch of them yesterday. They alluded to the fact that he went to the NBA guys and asked them how they handled guys that don't fit positions, like tweeners. And look at what he's done with Micah Parsons. Puts them all over the football field. The kind of thing we were desperate. Now, Chase Young's not a tweener, but it's the kind of thing we were desperate to see with Chase. Now, it turns out Chase has no motor, doesn't like football, and sucks.
Yeah. We knew that already, but yes.
It's that kind of innovation that you wouldn't necessarily think a guy in his mid-50s, might have. So I'm very pro Dan Quinn. I mean, I don't know if he would have been my top choice, but I don't think it was a horrible hire by any means. It's probably a safe hire. And,
also, if
compete for a Super Bowl, we're light years away from that. Yeah, I just want to be good.
You just want to be competing for
get better.
Playoff spots.
Right.
Yeah, I just want to get better.
And if he can
he'll get us better.
If he can assemble a staff, anything like that 2016 Atlanta staff that he had, I mean, it was filled with
Give
guys
us some
who
of
were
the names besides Shanahan.
Well, Kyle Shanahan, the OC, Raheem Morris, both LaFleurs, and Mike McDaniel were on that staff.
There you go.
So, I mean, he was identifying guys who have gone on to become – these guys are all head coaches with the exception of one of the LaFleurs.
But I understand.
Who's an OC.
I understand some of the hate because he's not an offensive guy. He's not 38 years old. JP, equates him to, a Rivera-like.
It feels like Rivera. The one thing I'll say.
And I understand that because you're looking at the overall numbers.
Yes.
But I'm just going to bank on the fact that he's a smart football coach. His players always loved him. He's a leader. He's going to hopefully put together a good staff. And that's why – and I predicted that they were going to make an announcement in the next couple of days when I said that yesterday. When Schefter said it was going to take 2 weeks, I didn't trust that. Because you got to go out and you got to start plucking guys to assemble a staff.
You don't want to be last.
You can't wait 2
I mean,
weeks.
they already were last hiring, but you don't want to be last.
And then,
of
course,
all of
the
a sudden
number
you don't
2
have
pick,
the guys.
Eric, the number 2 pick, whoever it is, has to work out.
Well, that's the most critical. Like, that is going to determine his fate.
Yeah.
If Adam Peters identifies and finds the right quarterback at 2, Dan Quinn has a really good shot. If the number 2 pick falls on his face,
and then all the guys they assemble around him.
Then
You know
Dan
why
Quinn
that
is doomed.
It's the Jimmies and the Joes. And you give him the
That's a big
Jimmies
part
and the
of it.
Joes, he will do well.
It's
I
part
think
of
so.
it.
And the biggest Jimmy and Joe's quarterback.
That's the biggest factor for sure. What I wanted to say is, look, I said this on Twitter. I said this on the show. It feels like Ron Rivera being hired again.
It doesn't
defensive
to me.
guy,
It does to you. It doesn't to me.
a defensive guy who had a modicum of success in his stop. And then when you look at the records, Ron Rivera in 9 seasons took his team to the playoffs 4 times. In 6 seasons with the Falcons, he only took Dan Quinn, the Falcons, to the playoffs twice.
Yeah, but I believe in
33%.
both those times. I listened to a guy on another podcast. I have to look at it because I was just listening to it as I was driving in this morning, who said he basically considered them competing for Super Bowls both those years. So that I think it was the first year. Maybe they won 10 games or something, or the second year, whatever, third year, whatever.
The year
it was.
they went to the Super Bowl, they won 11,
Right.
and then they won 10. But Shanahan was gone.
Right, but I think 2 of those years, that guy who was in that town covering them considered them competing for a Super Bowl. They were that good in his mind.
All right, well, Carolina at least once. So when you look at the numbers, Ron had a better winning percentage at Carolina. People go, oh, well, because he went 15-1 that year. What are you going to do, take that away? He had a very similar percentage of winning seasons as compared to Dan Quinn. So that gets me nervous. Somebody tweeted, though, this difference, and it's true. Ron went from one job right to the next. There was no break.
Yeah.
And Quinn had a couple seasons here where he's had time to think about what went wrong.
He's
worked as a
excelled
defensive
as a
coordinator.
DC in other spots.
Yeah, well, so did Ron.
No.
Ron had a
post
number one
his head
defense.
coaching experience. So he's worked with other staffs post his head coaching experience.
I know.
Seen how other organizations work and excelled at DC.
I am saying that, but I put this on I think on our Junkies Facebook page, facebook.com/junks. If you had to give me the order of importance in the offseason for the Commanders, 3 things: finding a GM, finding a head coach, and figuring out what to do with that number 2 pick.
Well, the one they have to hit on the
What
most
do you
is
put
the
last?
The coach.
I put the coach
goes
last.
last.
Right.
Now, I do think coaching's important.
It is
But
important.
I think
there's a lot of
I think
good coaches.
a lot of really good coaches don't succeed when they don't have a quarterback in the NFL.
To me, the
So
major
that,
distinction
to me, is more important.
Quinn is coming only to coach. Ron came to coach, clean up the
Right.
mess from Dan Snyder, run the personnel department. He
uniforms.
He was overmatched.
Yeah.
He had
Pick
too much
team
on his
names.
plate from day one.
Right.
Quinn's coming in just to do the coaching, and now there's a real grown-up taking care of the personnel that he doesn't even have to worry about.
When Ron came in, and if he didn't have to deal with all the off-the-field stuff, all right, first of all, he had to deal with Snyder, okay, and all the sexual harassment. He had to deal with the name change stuff.
Yeah.
He inherited Dwayne Haskins. He was probably forced to keep that, and maybe he would have taken a quarterback at 2.
He also
Who
was
knows?
dealing with cancer for a year.
He had cancer. He had to deal with the COVID stuff, right?
Yeah.
Empty stadiums. I mean, there's a lot. If all that stuff didn't happen, maybe it would have turned out differently.
It wasn't
We
a
don't
great
know.
run for him. It wasn't a great
So
run.
let's just see how Dan Quinn, how it starts. I'm not expecting big things
I
next
think
year.
they're totally
no,
different
it's
people.
going to take. You
So-
got to build it.
Yeah,
It's
you
not-
got to build it up.
I don't see this
Build it
being,
up.
like go from 4 wins to 9 or 10 all of a sudden.
No.
I don't think
see
so
that-
either.
I
Although
don't-
everybody keeps pointing to the Texans and go, if you find your quarterback, you can.
Well, that's an
I don't,
outlier.
I don't think that's true.
Maybe it can happen, but that's an outlier.
It's a miracle.
But let's just see.
It's not a miracle. It happens every year. There are teams that
It's
go
just hard
4
to
wins
do.
in the
We
playoffs.
have,
It's
we
hard
have
to
like
do.
3
Not with
players
rookie
that are
head
any
coaches
good.
and rookie quarterbacks. That's
It's
rare.
just hard to do. It's very hard to do.
Yeah.
There are
And
turnarounds,
so all the hate, and I see it. I'm sure social media. You guys see that stuff. I'm sure it's not a sexy hire. I get it, but it could be a good hire.
Of course.
It could be a good hire.
Of the 8 hires, the most popular ones are Harbaugh. Okay, and everybody would want Harbaugh. And I think McDonald to Seattle. Those guys could end up being duds.
Yeah.
And then guys you didn't expect to become stars could become stars.
I love it because and this is why, because everyone hates it. That actually makes me like it.
I think Jason sent a text,
I
Cody
swear to
Benjamin
God,
on
that makes
CBS.
me like it. Everyone hated Sirianni. Everybody hated Dan
That's so
Campbell.
true.
Everybody, I'll go back 25 years. Everybody hated Steve Mariucci. And I just like it. The bar
Cody
is
Benjamin
so
gave him
low.
a D+, right? On CBS.
He graded all of these. How many?
8 hires.
There was 8 hires, right? He graded all of them. Most of them were. I mean, he gave Harbaugh, the A+ for the Chargers, but most of them were in the B-. If it was bad, C. Benjamin gave the Commander's choice a D+.
I'm guessing
like
that was the worst
that's like
grade of all.
It
of
was
all
the
8.
worst.
That's
grade.
fine. That's like a draft day grade.
Correct.
Come back to me in 3 years. And you might be right. Maybe it's a D. Maybe it's an F. Who knows?
Who knows? Yeah, we
I
gotta
like
wait
it
it out.
because I don't know anything and I know it. But all these other guys on Twitter think they know everything. You don't know anything either. And let's just see how it plays out. I think it's as good a hire as most any. Would I rather have an offensive guy because it's a little sexier? Sure. But maybe now we can hire an offensive guy whose sole job will be to groom this quarterback, and Dan can be the head coach and do head coach stuff. I'm not necessarily
And run the
convinced.
defense. I expect him to call the plays on defense.
Maybe, but I don't think he's going to be the DC. He's going to hire
No,
a
they
DC.
always have a DC.
Okay, I don't necessarily need him to call plays on defense. Whatever your philosophy is.
Yeah, you can hand
I
it
kind of
over to
want
a
him
DC.
This is more of a joke, But when we were talking about it, he's been a booth guy for Dallas. Kind of want to be a
Be in
head
the
coach
booth?
from the booth.
You know what?
One thing I
that
know
would
is
be
when
hilarious.
he's in the booth, he's freaking fiery.
Here's what I do
Yeah.
want him to continue: backwards hat head coach.
That
Like,
would be
I mean,
amazing.
there aren't any of those
That would
guys
be
out
amazing.
there.
Hey,
And I
he's
tell you
a
what,
Jersey boy. That's what
He
they
is.
do.
Yep.
Of all the guests we have on this show, somewhat routinely, Logan Paulson might go down as one of the smarter ones. Okay,
Definitely.
And he loves him. Yeah.
swears by
Loves
the guy.
him. Loves that dude.
Loves him. In fact, there might even be I could even see Logan working with him. Seems to have a good relationship with him. So I like that too. So I'm pro Dan Quinn. It's not a sexy hire, and, but I think
I'm
I
willing
like
to
it.
see
You want to
what he
hear
can do.
Logan?
I'm
You want to hear
willing
Logan? Glowing about him.
Yeah.
Yep.
When I heard Dan Quinn was was up and being interviewed for this job, I just think there couldn't be a better person for that role, And what I mean by that is just when I was with him in Atlanta, like he made this work environment that was so exciting. Every day was such an exciting opportunity to come to work. You wanted to be in the building. You were all moving in the right direction. And that's him. That's how he addressed the players. That's him, how he empowered his coaching staff. And I never had so much fun playing football as I did from a head coaching standpoint as I did when I was in Atlanta. And so he deserves a ton of credit for that. I think he's got a great vision for kind of how to build a culture. I also think he understands some of his shortcomings and some of his failings from his time in Atlanta, and I think he's ready to kind of have an opportunity to fix that. So I know a lot of people are really excited about Ben Johnson, offensive coach, all those different things, but I think it's important for fans and people outside of that process to understand that the head coach has to be a motivator and a manager at the highest level, and I think Dan Quinn brings that. I think he also brings innovative football, and I think when you look at his resume, think about how bad the Cowboys defense was the year before he got there. And in an offseason, it transitioned. It was a lot of the same players. And the thing that's different is obviously the scheme, but obviously creating that buy-in with the players, creating the relationship with the players. And you're really not going to find a head coach, in my opinion, that I've played for that does a better job of that.
For the record, they finished 7-9 that season.
Mm-hmm.
And Logan was uber complimentary. And we talked about some of the coaches that Logan played for in his career. So, yeah, I mean, I trust him. Look, I'll give him a shot. I don't know that I'd give him 3 years. I expect results in 2 years. I'm not saying Super Bowl in 2 years, but
JP's
guys
very
turn
quick to blow.
Yeah, you guys like to hold on. You held on to.
Well, hold
to
on.
Gruden
Two
for
years is
so
a little unfair.
No,
Yeah,
but in
I mean, come on. You just
No,
want to see
minimum
improvement.
3.
correct. In
All right.
2 years, I think though you generally know if the guy's the right guy. For
Well,
the
you
job.
don't want to see a worse record in year 2. I
The
get
only
it.
way he doesn't get 3 years is if he posts like 2 and 4 wins in the first 2 years. And, it's just an abject disaster. And you see no plan or no path for them to improve.
Look, if you look at the percentage of new coaching hires that actually work out, it's like the first-round quarterback stats. I mean, seriously. I mean, just look at how many coaches don't last their contracts in their. Now he's a second-year coach because he was a coach of Falcons, but in their new jobs, it's hard to do.
Well, just like 25% of the league changed.
Yeah,
This
it's
year.
hard to
8
do.
teams out of 32
Right.
have new head coaches, and
Right.
next season they probably have another 8.
Yeah, it's just hard to do. But and the fans are going to be all over the place on this, I'm sure. But I'm sure the majority of them don't love the hire. But you also have to remember, the Commanders talk to other guys, and we're hearing rumors about contract discussions with other guys. Who knows? But nobody else wanted to come here.
Yeah,
Nobody
61%.
else wanted to come here.
I put a poll up on our Instagram page, Sports Junkies Radio. Give us a follow on Instagram. And it's 61% don't like the hire.
That bodes well
I'm not surprised.
because people are stupid. Everyone thinks they're a know-it-all. So
I'm
that
willing
bodes
to
well.
see what his second act looks like. Because there are plenty of guys who, in their second act, they succeed and they
course.
do well and they go on to win Super Bowls.
I like
Andy
his-
Reid jumps to mind.
Yeah.
In his
Bill
second act.
Belichick jumps to mind. Pete
Right.
Carroll
There are
jumps
a
to
lot
mind.
A lot of guys. Who,
I would say Mike McCarthy's doing okay in Dallas. Not great. He hasn't won a Super Bowl, but that's his
He's doing
second
well.
stop.
Winning
well, he
Super
gets
Bowl
knocked
is like
out early in the playoffs every
so
year.
hard to win a Super Bowl.
Yeah, I mean, he's got that
compiling
reputation.
double-digit wins.
All right, let's go to the phones. 800-636-1067 happened right after the show yesterday. Dan Quinn is in. He is your new head coach of the Washington Commanders.
If he could take the Skins to the playoffs 2 times out of 4, that would be
And he's
like,
Joe Gibbs 2.0.
That would be huge.
Success.
that would be pretty darn good.
Yeah. Now, you want more than that. You want better than that.
Sure. But that's how
That's
bad it's been
That's where
around
the
here.
bar is at this point.
All right.
And it's kind of sad, but that's where we are.
Let's go to Chris. And by the way, there's not much talent on the team. There's not much talent.
You know what? That's where Adam Peters comes in.
Exactly.
Adam Peters, that's why
He's
here.
going to get
replenish everything.
I'm just throwing this out there as a prediction because I have no idea who the quarterback's going to be. I have no idea what free agents they're
You have
signing.
an idea. It's probably going to be Drake May or Jaden Daniels.
Okay, but this is what I don't know.
Or
I don't know
Caleb
if they're going to be good. Okay, so
yeah.
But I think that the Washington Commanders will go to the playoffs in its third year.
JP's not going to give him 3 years. He'll
No,
probably
no.
have to two.
I say
I
year
think
3.
you would, no, but my point is by
Playoffs.
year 2, you kind of know. You kind of know.
I don't know.
I'm not predicting playoffs in the first 2 years, but year 3, I'm predicting playoffs.
I think that's a reasonable prediction.
Well,
And if he doesn't,
you should be on a track.
If he
for a
doesn't,
playoff.
then
you're going to be
then
questioning.
you're
it.
starting to reconsider.
Yeah. Right.
All right, let's go to Chris in Clinton. Chris, what's up?
Hey guys, good morning. How are you guys
Hey,
doing?
Chris.
We're doing good.
Hey, I was a Falcons fan. I'm still a Falcons fan, and I like Dan Quinn. 4 years and 5 games, I've supported Dan Quinn. I'm gonna tell you what you're gonna get out of Dan Quinn. First and foremost, one of you guys said it. Y'all alluded to it that we didn't spend money on defense. We drafted Thomas Dimitriov. They drafted in that Super Bowl. We had 7 first-year players starting on defense for our team. We had a young defense draft. We drafted a young defense, and Atlanta spent so much money on the offense. They spent so much money on Matt Ryan, Julio Jones, Alex Mack, and offensive line. They didn't spend money on defense. So Dan Quinn, the first year Dan Quinn in Atlanta, the defense finished top 15, where we finished 8-8. After that, we went to the Super Bowl the next year. But I'm going to tell you one thing. Dan Quinn will not be the defensive coordinator when he comes to Washington because he learned from his mistakes. The defense wasn't great when Dan Quinn was calling the defense. We was in the 20, 25th, 26th finishing defense. I'm a firm believer of second chances, and Dan Quinn, he proved that he studied the game of football because in Atlanta we sat back in the cover 3 defense a lot, and we was getting exposed. Dan Quinn, when he went to Dallas, he started blitzing, mixing up his defense. So the beauty about hiring Dan Quinn,
Yeah,
Just going to let you go because your phone sucks.
Your phone stinks.
Thanks.
He'll adapt his scheme to the talent that he has in-house and that gets drafted here.
JP might have alluded to it, but Drabby, what do you remember when he was there, when Dan was in Seattle? Were they overly aggressive? Were they passive? What were they like?
Yeah, that's the thing I love. First of all, he's going to move guys around all over the field. That's one of his signature things. And the thing that I loved about him in Seattle and in Dallas is that they are going to get takeaways. They are going to go for the ball. I mean, you saw what he did with Diggs and Bland in Dallas. I mean, Sherman led the league in interceptions year after year while he was up there. He's just a great teacher, great instructor. He's
Maybe
gonna have
So are
guys
you
fired
pro
up.
Great news
or
for
con
Forbes.
on the hire?
I like it. I mean,
Yeah.
if Seattle didn't hire McDonald,
Yeah.
I was all about Dan Quinn. I mean, I really like him.
I'm totally fine with it. Yeah.
I mean, look, he's not the sexy wonder boy that Grant wants, and Grant makes compelling arguments for sure. And it is similar if you just look on the outside to Rivera. And typically when coaches get fired, you want something completely opposite to give you that spark in the offseason that you feel good about, so you're the offseason champ. But I think Dan Quinn deserves another chance. He was almost hired last year. He decided to stay in Dallas. He's the one that pulled himself out of head coaching conversations last year.
He pulled a Ben Johnson last year.
They had a bad game against Green Bay in the
Yeah.
playoffs. So what? The year before they lost to San Francisco in the playoffs. San Francisco scored like 4 field goals. They did nothing on Dallas's defense.
Yep.
He can game plan.
Of course. I just think also I don't necessarily want my head coach to be obsessed with the one position that everyone's obsessed with here, quarterback. This frees him up.
Yeah,
He
let
can
the OC
hire a
and
guy, his OC and his quarterback's coach and his passing game coordinator. They can nurture him, and he can oversee it.
Yeah.
But they can nurture him. And I also think he just has more passion than
He's a
Ron did
very
at this point.
passionate dude.
By the time Ron came here, he was
Well,
checked
another plus
out.
is you weaken a division opponent by getting him away from Dallas, and it looks like he's going to bring Joe Witt Jr. as his DC. That's what the report is.
He's plucking
away
some
from
staff
Dallas
from
too.
Dallas, yeah.
So that's only a positive.
In 2021, the playoffs, offensive coaches won 12 games in the playoffs. Defensive coaches won 1. In 2022, in the playoffs, offensive coaches won 12 playoff games. Defensive coaches won 1. And in 2023-24, this season, it is 9-4. Buffalo is the team that won with the defensive head coach.
Well, you know the counter to that. The counter to that
I'd love to hear a counter to that because this is why owners are looking for offensive centric.
Well, the counter to that
coaches.
is those numbers are skewed because there's far more offensive-oriented head coaches than there are defense. So you're going to have fewer opportunities to win games from a defensive head coach.
But there's a reason for there being more offensive head coaches.
That's a different argument. But
it's not
apples to apples. It's not like you got 16 and 16.
Yes, however, it's not that far skewed off. It's not like it's 25 offensive coaches and only seven defensive coaches in the league. The last 5 Super Bowls have been offensive coaches. You can look at just winning percentages. So it's not to say that Quinn can't be successful. They just went against a trend, and the league kind of did, right? I think 5 out of the 8 coaches hired in this cycle are defensive guys.
Yeah.
Raheem Morris, defensive guy. O.J. Mayo, defensive guy.
All right, so here's what I'll say: is let's set the bar down. If you're setting the bar at win the Super Bowl, I'll bet against any coach you put in here. Okay, short of God, any coach you put here, I'm going to say won't win a Super Bowl, just because it's hard to win a Super Bowl. Now, if you say is he going to be successful in the sense that will he go to the playoffs? I don't know. I think if you go half the time,
that'd be great.
Yeah, you want a consistent playoff.
I think if you go half
producer.
the time, that'd be pretty good, but you probably wouldn't be fired. But so I don't know. Will this guy go to the playoffs twice in 4 years? What do you think the chances are?
25%.
I mean, it really depends on whether the quarterback develops into a good quarterback.
I'll go higher than that just because I'm pro Quinn. I'll go 40 to 50%.
Yeah, so if you set the bar at just like go to the playoffs a couple times out of 4 years and be somewhat competitive and have a shot, maybe, I think Quinn could do it. I'll bet against anybody, Ben Johnson, Kyle Shanahan, anybody.
Sure, take the field.
They're going to take this team to the Super Bowl.
Of course, Jason
just possible.
He gave us the stat. 65 coaches in the history of the game have been to the Super Bowl.
Right, how many coaches have there been in the NFL in history? Hundreds?
Yeah.
Hundreds.
Thousands? I don't know. Hundreds, probably, definitely.
Hundreds of head coaches.
You're just playing the odds. You're just playing the odds. Just say he's not going to be successful.
Right, correct.
Look,
but I think he will. I think he will be successful in the sense that I think we'll be more competitive. I think we'll be better. We should make the playoffs a few times, and then probably flame out because it's hard to win a Super Bowl.
I'm definitely optimistic about what he can do with the defense, and I think he can build a good staff. They have a GM in place. We have to trust that he's going to pick the right players, and then, man, that number 2 pick is huge. You can't do what the then Redskins did and draft Chase Young and miss out on quarterbacks who could potentially turn your franchise around.
We know in all of our hearts of hearts that they're not picking a defensive player at number 2. I mean, it's impossible that happens.
No.
I mean, 99% chance is a quarterback, but if it's not a quarterback, it's some other form of offensive player, like offensive lineman, receiver. Like unless you have, I don't know, the next Lawrence Taylor that is going to develop, you can't burn that number 2 pick on a defensive player when you have a screaming need at your quarterback. Even if you do have that long-term view of this is going to be a 3 or 4 year rebuild, it's not going to all happen in year 1. We're going to take our quarterback in the second year of the Adam Peters era. I think that they're obviously looking to jumpstart it in year 1 of his era.
I don't think it takes that long. Now, Daboll's second year, they regress, but Daboll's first year, boom, turned that Giants team around quickly.
Yeah, I mean, I think
it happens every season.
Daboll also, by the way, was he an offensive guy or defensive guy? What's Daboll?
He was an offensive guy. He was the guy that sprinkled the magic dust on Josh Allen in Buffalo.
Okay.
But he's on the hot seat already in New York, so that's how quickly it can turn.
All three of those guys are in the NFC East. I think Dan Quinn is an equal coach to these other coaches in the NFC East. It's not like
we're not going to get out.
You don't have McVay and Shanahan where they're spinning circles around you. You got a coach in this who can compete in this division.
He's definitely competent.
Yeah.
They could have done way worse, I think.
And if you believe in Peters and all these things that we say were positive about the team going in, the cap space, it's a chance, I think, to succeed. He definitely has a chance to succeed. It may take some time, but I think if Peters, with the cap space and the draft, and they have all these draft picks, I don't think it's going to take that long.
Yeah, they're not
to show you. I'm not saying they're going to win this year.
They're not winning 9 games next year. I don't think. They won 4 this year.
Well, that would be a remarkable year 1. If somehow that could happen.
They win
realistic
6,
goal would be 7.
Yeah, 6 or 7.
If they win 7, you say okay, step in the right direction.
9. then year
That'd be
3,
great.
10 plus. And then
In
you're
a perfect
the playoffs.
world, that would be great. But you're seeing even with Dable, it ain't a perfect
I know
world.
we got to go to the calls real quick, but I'm just looking at all of the coaches hired since 2019, okay, in the NFL. From 2019 to 2022, there were 23 coaching hires. A lot.
How many were good? If you just had to judge
14
it?
of them were fired already.
Yeah.
So since 2019, 14
More than
coaches, and about half of those guys were offensive guys like McDaniels, like Josh, or like Adam Gase, like Kingsbury.
Right.
14
Remember
guys
how
out of
people
23 are fired.
were on Kingsbury, like he's the next boy genius.
Yeah, they thought he was a genius, right?
Yeah.
Hey, he's back.
Right? Well, that's a good spot for him. OC.
Yeah.
OC is a good spot for him.
All right, we got to take a break. We'll be taking your calls throughout the show. Reaction to the Dan Quinn hire.